every age, there is a cause worth fighting for. But in the future, the greatest threat to our survival will not be man at all.
Hey, kid, what's going on? It's war! We're going to war!
Now the youth of tomorrow must travel across the stars to defend our world.
We are a generation commanded by fate to defend humankind.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
We are going in with first wave. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has more than two legs. You get me? We get you, sir!
But they will face an enemy more devastating than any ever imagined.
Here they come!
Incoming!
Mayday, this is Roughneck 2.
We're under attack, sir. We need retrieval now.
Someone made a damn mistake.
No!
The bugs laid a trap for us, didn't they?
TriStar Pictures takes you to the front lines of the next frontier.
Kill them all!
Starship Troopers.
Hello and welcome to Unclear and Present Danger, the podcast about the political and military thrillers of the 1990s and what they say about the politics of that decade. I'm Jamelle Bowie. I'm a columnist with the New York Times opinion section.
I'm John Gans. I write a column for The Nation. I write the political Substack Unpopular Front, and I'm the author of When the Clock Broke, Conmen, Conspiracists, and How America Cracked Up in the Early 1990s, which is available paperback wherever.
No good. Yeah, wherever books are sold and people should pick it up. I was just going to say that, and as of September 9th, you are known for spreading the hoax that the president was dead.
I am the person who convinced the world for about 24 hours, really, that Trump was dead. And I don't know why people decide to believe that. I guess they wanted it to be true. And some people got very mad at me. And some people were... But I just tweet it. You know, sometimes you just tweet. The weird thing about Twitter or X or Blue Sky, or sometimes like you literally have barely a thought in your head.
Right.
And you write something, you're just like, that's kind of funny. And then people project all of this meaning onto it. Like they had all of these like complicated psychological explanations for why I would have done it. And I was like, I literally thought I was doing a bit. And some people thought it was really funny. The problem was that like the bit was a hit with my friends, and then they all started to like it, and then it started to snowball.
Right.
So like
right.
I was like, damn. It was a victim of its own success, really, because I was like, oh yeah, my friends think it's funny. I went to bed, and then I woke up, and like the world was like screaming about Trump being dead, and I was like, oh, it was kind of funny. I mean, I wasn't worried or anything because, you know, whatever. But yeah, weird things can happen on Twitter, and I made them have to deny it, which is pretty funny. They had to go on TV and say he wasn't dead.
This is sort of the great thing about the administration being so online. I mean, it's generally quite bad the administration's so online, but yeah. You can kind of make them respond to things if they become sufficiently popular online. You forcing them to confirm the president wasn't dead. I wrote that piece about J.D. Vance sucking and not doing anything. And like over the weekend in Politico Playbook, that weekend, J.D. Vance's spokesperson was like, the vice president has a very busy schedule. He's always doing stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. They were like, okay, we need to place this story immediately that Vance is actually doing something. I'm sure he read your column and got furious.
Oh, I hope so. I hope he was spitting mad.
Good.
Yeah, it sucks. I hope he knows that like there's like a viral song about him being a pig man that I inspired.
He probably knows all because all these people. You know what I heard, and I don't quote me on this because it's completely third-hand knowledge, but I believe it. It's that young staffers in the Trump administration regularly watch Nick Fuentes, not because they necessarily like him, but I'm sure they do, but because like they need to watch him because they think it's important to get a sense of where their constituents are at.
That sounds 100% believable.
It's 100% true, right?
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of Clinton staffers reading the New Republic, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should do the political stuff up front and then cut the rest of the show because it sounds we're kind of getting on a roll here.
No, so
okay.
I want Connor to keep all this in because this can be enticing. This can be enticing to viewers or listeners.
Okay. Yes.
So, listeners, if you enjoy this kind of political banter, then on the Patreon, we'll be putting out a weekly sort of little show where we basically do straightforward political commentary. So there'll be an episode of that this week, whenever this comes out. When you're listening to this podcast on this movie, you'll also be able to go to the Patreon and subscribe and listen to the political podcast. But this is your enticement to sign up for the Patreon, to hear us do political banter. And the great thing about the Patreon is that since people have to pay for it, we're a little less, a little less filtered, a little more inclined to say things that might be a little crazy.
Yeah, you get the raw, uncut John and Jamelle. Not that we're that filtered to begin with, but it's even more so. Yeah.
Rob will give it to you with no.
I don't have a job. Jamelle has a real job. I don't have a job, so I can say whatever. I don't have to worry about anything. Yeah.
So we're going to get on to the main the main event for this podcast, but I'll say that last night or yesterday evening, the video team at the Times reached out. They sent me a text. Like, hey, do you want to do a TikTok about the Epstein stuff? And I was like, listen, guys, I can't say what I want to say on the New York Times official TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand why you reached out to me, but I really, you don't want me doing this one, guys.
No. Yeah. But you'll get your thoughts on that on our Patreon.
Okay. On this week's episode of main feed standard episode of Unclear and Present Danger, we watched the 1997 Paul Verhoeven film Starship Troopers, based off of the novel, I'd say loosely based off the novel of the same title by the storied sci-fi author Robert Heinlein, who isn't really all that read that much, but for a time was kind of, orthodox, must-read science fiction. When I was a teenager, when I was 15 or whatever, and it's like, I want to read sort of serious science fiction. It's like, yeah, you read Stranger in a Strange Land, you read Starship Troopers. And Starship Troopers, the novel, ends up inspiring basically an entire genre of military science fiction, including direct responses to Heinlein, of which I would say this movie is one of. I'd say this movie should be considered a direct response to Heinlein. Anyway, Starship Troopers stars Casper Van Dien as Johnny Rico, and I'm about to go through a bunch of actors, only like maybe a handful you will recognize, and I think we'll talk about this later. I think you should understand the kind of anonymity of some of the actors in this film as being an intentional choice. But in any case, Starship Troopers stars Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyers, Denise Richards, Jake Busey, Neil Patrick Harris, Patrick Muldoon, Michael Ironside, and Clancy Brown. It was cinematography by Jost Vacano, who has worked together with Paul Verhoeven on a number of films, including 1987's RoboCop and 1990's Total Recall, as well as 1995's Showgirls, and then the Verhoeven's follow-up to Starship Troopers, Hollow Man. The screenplay is by Edward Neumeier, another Verhoeven collaborator, who also worked on RoboCop. We should probably do RoboCop on this podcast, which feels less like science fiction and more just like, yeah, this is what America is.
Yeah.
But good movie. So the plots of Starship Troopers, the film, and Starship Troopers, the book, are actually quite similar. The film and book take place in a far future where Earth is governed by the United Citizen Federation, a regime, it's said not necessarily democratic, founded some years by military veterans after democracy and science brought human civilization to the brink. Citizenship and the right to vote are only granted to those who complete military service. The story follows Johnny Rico, Casper Van Dien, a young man from Buenos Aires who enlists in a high school star of whatever sport they're playing, who enlists in the Mobile Infantry to follow his girlfriend, Carmen Ibanez, played by Denise Richards, into service in order to become a citizen. His best friend, Carl Jenkins, played by Neil Patrick Harris, enters military intelligence. They go through basic training and eventually grow into capable soldiers. We see here during basic training as well the brutality of the Mobile Infantry and of the world in which they live. After they finish basic training, they learn that the peace that existed between humanity and an insectoid race called the Arachnids, or the bugs, collapses after the Arachnids launch a devastating meteor attack that obliterates Buenos Aires, killing millions of people, including Rico's family. Rico, fueled by revenge, becomes a dedicated soldier, and the Mobile Infantry is deployed in a series of battles against the Arachnids. Rico rises to the ranks. He reunites with his classmates, Carmen and Carl. Carmen is a pilot in sort of the Starfleet of this Earth Federation. The movie concludes with a dangerous assault on a arachnid homeworld, where the Federation captures a brain bug, a bug capable of intelligence and strategy. We're reunited with Neil Patrick Harris's character. We'll talk about that a bit later. Throughout this journey, various characters are killed. We see the classmates of Rico and teachers of Rico suffer in war. But the film is presented to you as kind of an almost triumphant look at the Earth Federation's military campaign against the bugs, and a heroic story for Johnny Rico, who concludes the film the leader of his own platoon of soldiers, or battalion of soldiers, or what have you, leading the charge against the bugs. Carmen, an accomplished pilot, and Carl, an accomplished intelligence agent. The film leaves you confident that humanity will prevail against the Arachnids. The tagline for Starship Troopers was a new kind of enemy, a new kind of war, totally generic and reflective of the fact that Hollywood had no idea what to do with this movie. They were completely baffled by this movie. The film didn't actually do that great at box office, basically made back what it cost. And along with Hollow Man, another expensive, unsuccessful film, kind of marked the end of Paul Verhoeven's jaunt out to Hollywood. He returns to Europe. Where is he from? He's
Dutch, right?
He's Dutch, right? Returns back to the Netherlands and France to make more films, of which there is one pretty recently, actually. What was the recent one? Benedetta in 2021, about some nuns. People like that one quite a bit. It is about some nuns. That's all I'm going to say about it. Starship Troopers can be found to rent or buy on Amazon and iTunes. There's also a perfectly serviceable 4K disc with some special features on it. I did not launch the special features this time. Maybe next time. I've seen this movie a ton. Maybe next time I'll do it with the director's commentary. Starship Troopers was released in the United States on November 7th, 1997. So let's check out the New York Times for that day.
Okay, let's see what's going on here. This is interesting. President issues last-minute plea on trade measure. Fast-track vote is today. Congress waivers as pressure mounts against expanding White House authority. President Clinton, fearing defeat in his quest for expanded trade negotiating authority, made unusual public appeal for support tonight, accusing interest groups of intimidating members of the House who might otherwise vote for the bill. Opponents of the so-called fast-track legislation gained new ground today, prompting Mr. Clinton to cut short a trip to Texas for the dedication of the George Bush Presidential Library and return to Washington to lobby publicly and privately for votes. This is interesting because now the President of the United States doesn't really feel like he needs Congress to do anything and feels like he has carte blanche based on a very dubious reading of the laws in order to do trade negotiations. They basically think they could just impose sanctions at will. This shows basically, Gingrich did a lot of things to screw things up, but roughly the U.S. system kind of functioning as it should, right? You have the House of Representatives kind of trying to grab powers away from the president and vice versa.
Right. Yeah.
So there's checks and balances. The president is trying to get political support through a speech. Normal American democracy happening here. Kind of miss it. But I think that goes to show how different things used to be. I don't want to idealize the past too much, but this was the way we were accustomed to politics working, and I don't think it really works that way anymore. There was just a big piece in the Times about Congress basically being a rubber stamp. Yeah.
I'd say the big distinction between now and then is just that Congress then behaved as if it had an independent identity from the president. These days, Congress, and really the Republican majority in Congress, acts as a little more. It's actually a lot to say that it acts. It basically doesn't exist except for confirmations and budget bills. Otherwise, it's ceded pretty much every single bit of its authority to the president.
Yeah. Not good. This is interesting if you're like me. Isaiah Berlin. Oh, it's Isaiah. I'm sorry. That's how the British say it. Isaiah Berlin, philosopher and pluralist, is dead at 88. Sir Isaiah Berlin, the philosopher and historian of ideas, revered for his intellect and cherished for his wit and his gift for friendship, died of a heart attack Wednesday evening in Oxford, England, following a long illness. He was 88. A staunch advocate of pluralism in a century in which totalitarians and utopians claim the title to the one single truth, Sir Isaiah considered the very notion that there could be one final answer to organizing human society a dangerous illusion that would lead to nothing but bloodshed, coercion, and the deprivation of liberty. I've always been a fan of Isaiah Berlin's writing. I like his intellectual history, things writing about the counter-enlightenment and Romanticism was some of the earliest stuff that got me into European thought and European intellectual history of ideas. So I really always liked him very much. And some of his political theory is interesting. I think I am somewhat to the left of him now. I think his book on Marx is not very good, but I would, if you're interested in, he's also a very good writer. So, I mean, he makes things that would otherwise be kind of intimidating, easy to understand. So if you're interested, check him out.
Yeah, I mean, I read Berlin in college. I think for any college student who is sort of doing the liberal political tradition kind of thing, you know, history of political theory, you encounter Berlin at some point. And I would second John's recommendation. If those are things that you're interested in, Berlin is 100% worth reading. And he is indeed a great writer.
Yeah, very, very readable. Well, This one also is interesting to read in light of present circumstances. A Lament by the Hudson as Trump eclipses the moon. One of the secret pleasures of Shirley Liebman took from her Lincoln Towers apartment was wearing her torn gold slippers and nothing else. She sang Gershwin or listened to opera and never bothered with the blinds. Outside her 11th floor window lay only the Hudson and beyond that New Jersey. And on clear evenings, she would watch the sun fall like a red stone. Basically this is who Trump was in my childhood, was basically an obnoxious figure in New York local issues who would be in the paper because he was being an asshole again or doing something annoying to people. Never did we believe he would be president. So it's strange that, this is the way he used to be covered, as being like, oh yeah, he's building some kind of monstrosity that's ruining people's views. I think that this particular development no longer is called Trump, is no longer bears Trump's name because the residents removed it. But yeah, this used to be the way we thought of Trump. What else do we got here? I think, we have something about diplomatic approach to Iraq as big risk for UN's leader. Less than a year after taking office as Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan might have put his reputation on the line in his first major crisis by choosing diplomacy over confrontation to deal with Saddam Hussein. Kofi feels this is a situation of war and peace. A diplomat who has known the Secretary General for years has said this week, suggesting why Mr. Annan had not left the matter in the hands of Security Council. He feels a moral obligation to get involved. In this case, Mr. Annan is gambling against historical odds that diplomacy might persuade the Iraqi president to end his ban on American arms inspectors rather than provoke an attack by the United States. Well, we all know how this turned out. Yeah. Well, basically, the U.S. didn't seem like it was going. Neocons had their own plans, but the United States was sort of not making any real gestures. We would bomb them sometimes, and there was stuff in the no-fly zone and stuff like that. But I don't think a military invasion of Iraq was on the table until 9/11.
Yeah, I think so. There was no, as far as I remember, and as far as I can recall, and what I've read about, there was no real energy for trying to take out Saddam, in part because there was a recognition among more sober-minded people that he's kind of a minor figure in the Middle East at the time, right? Like, Iraq was no longer some regional hegemon. He was contained. And it's noteworthy that to justify the war, the Bush administration basically had to portray Hussein as like Hitler too.
Yeah.
Hitler 2 plus, what if Hitler had nukes? Was basically
Hitler's
how they sold the war.
Gonna get nukes, and he didn't have them, and it was just a big anyway.
Don't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, that I remember that. Oh God, it was so annoying. It was so stupid and annoying. This the only thing that's come close in the stupidity is the stuff that they're doing now. But I just remember being pissed off every day by just how stupid their rhetoric was. Yeah, you were supposed to fucking believe that shit. It was insulting. It was insulting. It
was base propaganda, and yet lots of people bought it. And I think a note about base propaganda is a nice way to segue into talking about this movie. Yeah. John, what's your experience with Starship Troopers, either the movie or the book?
So I've never read the book. I'm not a huge sci-fi guy. I watched this movie. I went to the theater to watch this movie with my dad when I was 12, I guess. And it was a little uncomfortable because the kind of full frontal scene in the shower. My dad hated the movie, and I don't think just because of that. I think he thought I don't think he liked the satire or appreciated the satire. He just thought it was kind of tasteless and stupid. And I remember being like fine with it, but not super enthused at it as a kid. It was kind of cool, like the action sequences, but I also found it to be, I guess I got the satire. Me and my friends kind of got the satire. I had friends who thought it was cool, but it was not a movie like, I don't know, that I really got into at that age. But yeah, and then since then, I think I might have seen it once since, and other than this time. Obviously, I don't understand. I was looking at reviews from the era, and I don't understand how anybody didn't get it. Like some people got like it was so exaggerated, and Verhoeven's history and his, growing up under German occupation, I think they should have been able to get it. But a lot of people claim that it was a fascist movie, complain that it was a fascist movie and not a send up of fascism. Now, I think Heinlein's book was not a satire. Heinlein believed in the militaristic society that he was presenting. Now, important details changed from the book to the movie. In the society that Heinlein presents, the main character, Rico, is of Filipino descent because this fascist or this kind of multinational fascist, multiracial fascist regime has solved racial problems with its, militarism, and that's no longer an issue. The movie makes real pains to replicate the aesthetics. There are people of color in the movie, but the movie takes real pains to present an aesthetics that's very not just fascist but Nazi, because the characters by intent are supposed to look like people Leni Riefenstahl might cast,
right?
Or would be, and the uniforms, if you know anything about Nazi Germany, the insignia and the uniforms look like Waffen SS and SS uniforms. So Verhoeven very clearly indicated what he was trying to say with the movie. This is a post-apocalyptic movie where there's a world fascist government that's highly militaristic. Obviously, some veterans have taken over and gotten rid of democracy. So yeah, it's clear what the political message of the movie is, and I'm very surprised that people didn't get it. Now, some people watched this movie, got it, but didn't think it was a effective satire because it didn't point to anything else, and it kind of was just pleased with how good of a job it was doing. And I gotta tell you, Jamelle, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this movie, because I did not find it particularly interesting on a second watch. I did think sometimes watching it today, when we obviously have somewhat of a fascist government, there were things that resonated with me today, but I found my patience being a little tested by this movie. Neither the action nor the satirical elements exactly did it for me. Although I have to say, its representation of like the dream of fascism being eternal movie high school, like 80s and 90s movie high school, that's what they actually are doing now. They're constantly trying to like play on people's stupid nostalgia, not of anything that happened, but of that kind of movie. So, and the love triangles and so on and so forth. So I'm interested in your defense. I know that you have a defense of this movie that you've brought up before. So I want to hear it. Yeah. But I got to tell you, I'm not entirely sold.
So I also saw this movie when it was in theaters when I was 10 at the time, and my dad took me to see it. I wonder how many dads took their sons to see this movie.
See Starship Troopers.
I think assuming that probably it was going to be a just straightforward film. At 10, I do not think the whatever intent there was came across. But I've seen this movie a bunch. It's something I rewatch, not every year, but like I rewatch it semi-regularly. I do like the film. I read Heinlein's book when I was in high school, as I mentioned previously. That book, as you said, John, is it's very clearly not satirical. It is Heinlein criticizing what he saw as sort of the decadence of the 1950s of youth culture at the time, and his notion of military service ensuring citizenship is put forth as something that is maybe worth replicating, or at least that kind of forced service being a necessary part of political representation. I'll say also that the film, or the book, as I said, inspired responses, and one of the most famous responses is by Joe Haldeman. Now, Heinlein, writing in the 1950s, in the wake of the World Wars. He served in the U.S. Navy. I do not believe he actually served in the Second World War, but he was in the Navy in the 1920s and 1930s. Yeah, I'm looking at his biography right now.
He might have been too old to
he was too old to serve in the war. Yeah. But he was in the military. Joe Haldeman, whose book The Forever War is a response in a lot of ways to Starship Troopers, is writing in 1974, 1973, 1974 in the wake of Vietnam. And that really, I think, captures so much of the differences. Haldeman actually served in Vietnam. He was wounded in combat, received a Purple Heart, and his combat experiences very much reflected in that novel. And The Forever War, far from presenting service as ennobling, is all about the sense of alienation that soldiers feel or can feel in the wake of their service. I think it's one of my favorite books, and I highly recommend it to anyone who likes science fiction. It's interesting, but it is sort of trying to again respond to Heinlein. And then there's a bunch of other Starship Troopers media after this film. There was a animated television show for kids, which I actually watched a lot of and thought was pretty good. There were sequels, which are bad. But if you are like me and like to just watch trash sometimes, are perfectly serviceable for that purpose. I feel like there's always been talk of maybe doing a more straightforward adaptation of the book. There are video games. This obviously is, I think, very well suited to video games. So lots of Starship Trooper stuff. I've consumed much of it. Now, my view of this film is not that it is satire, but I think that the term satire, which suggests sort of like a knowingness, a winkingness, which there's actually very little of that in this movie, doesn't quite work. I've always thought of Starship Troopers as basically being an in-universe propaganda film for the fascist government in the movie, right? This is the movie that government produced to sell the war to the people under that government. And so the matinee idol looks of the characters, the interstitials throughout the film where you're being shown basically either recruitment ads or, how the Federation's fighting the war. For one view, that can be, you can treat those as sort of like not really part of the movie, just like transitional things. But I think you should understand them as part of the narrative of the film. And that is because you, the viewer, are watching the movie that government has produced to get you, the viewer, to sign up for the war against the bugs, against the Arachnids. And I think basically the entire film works on that level. And to the extent that it's trying to do anything, I would agree with you, John. I'm not sure it has like a sophisticated message. I think it's more or less trying to basically be like, I gotcha. Like trying to see if a viewer begins to buy into the perspective of the film, which is right that like this is a recognizable society, not unlike your own, fighting a monstrous enemy, and that you want them to prevail against the monstrous enemy. If you watch it from the perspective of this is a propaganda film, so like I would describe it as maybe like a piece of meta satire, right? Like if this is a propaganda film produced by the government of the in the universe to sell the war, then there are a bunch of other questions to ask. Do the bugs actually look like this? Like, is this at all a realistic portrayal of who the enemy is? Did the bugs destroy Buenos Aires? I think the film suggests very subtly that no, this was an accident. You'll see in Carmen's training mission, she bumps into an asteroid, and it's after this training mission, sometime later, that an asteroid destroys Buenos Aires. Was that the Arachnids, or was that a training incident that created a catastrophe? I think the movie drops these hints here and there that, you know, nothing is what you see. Obviously, as you point out, the designs of the uniforms, especially Doogie Howser, Neil Patrick Harris's uniform at the end of the film, where he's just straight up in an SS uniform, long, you know, leather flowing cape, hat, the whole 9 yards. That is just putting like a dotting the I, crossing the T, like really trying to hammer home to the viewers, these are the bad guys, right? Like this fascist government is actually probably the antagonist of this film, because you don't know anything about the Arachnids. You only know what they're telling you about them. And there's and from that view, there's no evidence whatsoever that the Arachnids are some kind of aggressive threat. If anything, it might be the humans who are the aggressors in this war and looking for a way to manufacture further conflict. So that's like my take on the film, that like you should it's satire, but it's not satire like the death of Stalin, right? It's a better movie. It's more or less trying to do like a sci-fi it's like a sci-fi triumph of the will. It just is.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do think that it has a little, well, yeah, I mean, and you know, there's a comment on contemporary culture because he pulled from a lot of you know, TV idols at the time, and the fact that they could just fit right into this fascist society. This might tell you something about the aesthetics of television. But I think there are moments that are directly commentating, like when they show the TV cable news and how idiotic, and they show how it continually shows how idiotic and anti-intellectual and mistake prone this militaristic society is, right? So it shows, as you say, it kind of shows that maybe a training mistake caused this. It shows that there's absolutely no interest in trying to understand the bugs, and in fact they're extremely hostile to it. Now, okay, that's where some of the satirical elements in the book kind of the movie kind of worked for me, because I felt it was sadly recognizable today with the extreme stupidity and anti-intellectualism of MAGA. It was a little bit, well, Fox News hadn't really gotten going at this point. This is okay. Now I'm coming around to the movie. This movie, yeah, is like an all-American North Korea it depicts, and that's basically the aesthetic of MAGA and now Fox. So this movie is basically the world they want to create. Obviously it's not going to be as slick, and people are not going to be as good looking or skinny, but like you know, I don't think a MAGA person, or the idiots that they have like as ideologues, I don't know, would look at this movie and see anything particularly objectionable about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think a MAGA person, this is how they imagine American society was, right? Like this is where there's kind of like unquestioning obedience to like your social betters, and everything's all wholesome. You mentioned it being kind of like trying to make the movie reality actual reality. Like this is what I think. Maybe not, you know, my MAGA neighbor, or my MAGA neighbor across the way, but certainly the kind of young chuds that make up the online right and, you know, are in the Trump administration. I think this is how they imagine the past was, or so America was something like this, and that that's what has been lost and now needs to be restored through, you know, the brutal suppressing of their political enemies. There's something, I mean, there's, I would draw not just a connection between the, Fox and OAN and sort of like modern right wing propaganda, but also between sort of the whole trad wife, and trad aesthetic, and what's portrayed in this film. It's interesting to think about this in the context of the '90s because, and I mentioned that audiences and critics were somewhat baffled by this film, weren't really sure where it was coming from. And the kind of, so you have, right, in this period, the late 90s, you have this sort of mini boomlet of films about kind of how suffocating kind of corporate modernity is, right? So you have Office Space, and you have The Matrix, and Dark City, and there's a couple others, The Truman Show. All of them are kind of circling around the same thing, that like there's something about our corporate and commercial and like highly managed social lives that is not just suffocating but sinister. In The Truman Show, Truman is controlled by television producers. His life is a television show. Something sinister was going on. In Dark City, the titular Dark City is a creation of a sinister outside. Like everything's kind of weird. And of course, in The Matrix, what you think is real life is actually just a computer simulation put together by sinister artificial intelligence. So that's kind of floating around in the culture, in the broader pop culture, and Starship Troopers doesn't really fit into that, right? Like it's not a critique of corporate life, of commercial life. It is perhaps a critique of militarism and jingoism and these things, but it doesn't. Kind of the thing about late 90s America is, although we are engaged in interventions abroad, this isn't like the 2000s America, right? Like this isn't the criticism of Clinton was that he was, I guess, to use a term from a couple decades later, like leading from behind, in terms of his use of American military force. It was multinational partnerships. It was working through the UN and NATO. It wasn't sort of unilateral
now,
American force. Go ahead.
If this movie came out during the War on Terror, I think it would be a pretty sharp movie.
It'd be immediately recognized. Right.
And some of the aesthetics of the movie reminded me a little bit of, it's not that many years off, of the awfulness and shallowness of early 2000s period, where it was a combination of kind of Bush era materialism and the idiocy of the War on Terror in Iraq. Now it looks quaint, but I think that, this movie was maybe timed, unfortunately, a little bit badly, and maybe that's not why it didn't do super well. But if this movie was made in the midst of the War on Terror, I think it would have been, really something. That being said, obviously Verhoeven kind of saw these potentials and was sensitive to them, and they were there.
So that's what's interesting about it, right? That's sort of what's interesting about Verhoeven's career in Hollywood. So Verhoeven, who is, I believe, in his 80s now, has been working in film since the 1960s. He's working in Dutch television in the 1960s. He does his first feature film in 71. He's working throughout the 80s, throughout the 70s and the early 80s in the Netherlands. He's a collaborator with Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer is a Verhoeven guy, the late Rutger Hauer. And all of his films, he's his family escaped German occupation. or survived under German occupation, rather. He has this experience with the war as a child, and his films are highly political. In his Netherlands films are highly political. So he's a popular Dutch filmmaker, and then makes his way into American filmmaking. And his first American film is Flesh and Blood, starring Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's a historical adventure film, but a horny one, which is kind of
course. Yeah,
that's the thing.
Course.
Yeah, par for the course. And that kind of begins his Hollywood career. It's, I think, basically well received. His super hit, though, the thing that kind of like takes him from being interesting Dutch guy to sort of like big American filmmaker, is 1987's RoboCop, which is a huge hit. Makes $53 million off of a $13 million budget. Is not its reception is critically positive, and it quickly became like a cult classic. It is widely it's very influential in science fiction filmmaking. It's a whole thing. And RoboCop, I think, also is, it's where his political eye for the United States gets even sharper. It's basically, using maybe more contemporary language, it's basically a movie about neoliberalism. It's like this is the end point of market commercial society and the privatization of everything, and the elevation of corporate interest over civic ones. The end point is just rampant criminality, both official and unofficial, licit and illicit worlds, and the destruction of the person themselves, and the person. And this is the Peter Weller, Alex Murphy, his character, is literally killed by these criminals and rebuilt as this machine man, and has to the story of the film is a story of RoboCop rediscovering himself as Alex Murphy, of reclaiming his personhood. But the movie, you watch it today, and it feels like it was written last year. Like, it feels like a film that is attuned very specifically to 2024 and 2025, but it's Verhoeven kind of just projecting forward the trends he sensed in the United States in the 1980s. And this ends up, his film after this, Total Recall, a movie I like a lot, not as good, but I enjoy it quite a bit, is not as politically sharp, but again, it's dealing with these same issues of consumerism and corporate culture and neoliberalism and all these things. So that's all to say that I do think Verhoeven has a bit of the curse of Apollo, right? Like, he has a good sense of the most dysfunctional things in American culture, and is able to translate those to cinema. So Starship Troopers, I think you're right to say, it's picking up on American jingoism and American militarism, and it comes out at a moment when those things weren't especially salient. But 4 years later, literally 4 years later from when the film comes out, it's basically perfectly suited for the world of post 9/11 America.
Yeah. I mean, he does the kind of thing in his movies where he plays with the audience, because RoboCop, obviously you can tell where the political consciousness is there, but he's made some very pulpy and on the surface exploitative movies, and you're kind of wondering all the time with his films, like, how much of this guy is in on the joke, or how much is he just like kind of dealing schlock? And I think that the answer is pretty obviously he has a sense of humor, and he's interested in kind of like playing with these conventions in order to make them, to make a meta commentary on them. Not exactly the same way. I'm not comparing him to David Lynch, but David Lynch also plays with cliches and hackneyed themes kind of pulpy or cheesy things and kind of makes art out of them. And you can maybe say that sometimes Verhoeven is doing something similar. I don't think he's quite an artist on the same level, but like what is going on with Showgirls? Like that movie is terrible on one hand, but was he kind of aware that it was like, was that tongue in cheek? Was it not? I think that movies get a lot of mileage out of that.
Yeah.
And I tried to watch one of his Dutch films because it looked cool, Black Book, which was about the war, about the resistance, and it was just too Verhoeven-y in its luridness that I just didn't like it as a presentation of World War II, because I just felt like his aesthetic was inappropriate for it. Like, I was like, dude, you're making a movie about the war. Like, can you drop your bullshit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, it's too serious of a subject matter for you to do this really cheesy Verhoeven stuff. But I can appreciate him as an artist and appreciate that he has like a real sensitivity to this level of bad taste, and kind of revels and comments on it at the same time. But well, he made Basic Instinct. It's not such a great movie, but it's kind of fun, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's maybe why people struggle to understand that this was a satire, because they were used to Verhoeven being a little bit inscrutable about what he was trying to say with his movies. But I think once you make RoboCop, you kind of know where he's at.
No, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like RoboCop to me seemed, for his American output, RoboCop really does seem like to be the skeleton key, right? Like you watch RoboCop and kind of you get this guy's point of view, and he has like, he has a take. Yeah. I in the same way that I am a big Brian De Palma fan, I feel like De Palma is divisive. Good
comparison.
But De Palma has a take, right? He say what you will about the guy. He has an angle, and it's schlocky and exploitative very often. But he's trying to do something, and I am attracted to that in filmmakers. Like, are you trying to do something? Are you trying to say something? Are you trying to get a rise of the audience in an interesting way? If so, then I think I can vibe with that. I'll say real quick, Basic Instinct. I mean, I sort of take that movie to be kind of like Verhoeven commenting on like American sexual dysfunction. But I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too.
I don't know if I don't. It's one of those movies that I'm going to watch in my living room. And my wife will be like, "What's going on, Jamelle? What are you watching?"
Yeah.
But it's been a minute since I've seen Basic Instinct, and I think I've seen. It's been a minute since I've seen Showgirls. Like, I feel like I should revisit it.
Watch it again. It's completely absurd.
Yeah, maybe I'll do a whole Verhoeven. Just like make my way through all the American stuff. Sure. All right, Starship Troopers. Any other thoughts I have on that movie specifically? I don't know. I mean, it does. I think it does what it sets out to do, as far as its sort of like, as far as Verhoeven's aesthetic choices. I think it actually holds up quite well in 2025. If nothing else, it looks good. I think the action parts of it are pretty decent as far as these things go. I think it's a well constructed film that is trying to comment on the aspects of Heinlein's story that Verhoeven viewed as being fascist, which I mean they straightforwardly were. Which is what's interesting to me, that there has been this desire, this talk about doing a more faithful adaptation of the book. And it's like a more faithful. What is a more faithful adaptation of Starship Troopers? Is it just sort of like, Verhoeven's movie at the very least in its style? It's clear. Again, his point of view, I think, is quite clear. But if you're going to do like a more sedate, straightforward adaptation of Starship Troopers, wouldn't you just be making like literal fascist art?
Yeah,
like that's all that would be.
Yeah, because he believed it. He wasn't joking, you know. So, yeah, I don't. I mean, not to. Just, I don't know. I don't want to upset science fiction fans, but
No, I mean you should not feel
like, is it that important of a piece of artwork that it needs to be adapted again? I mean, come on, like what
Yeah.
we're not talking about the Lord of the well, even that, but like, you know, this is not fucking Charles Dickens over here. This is not Jane Austen. It's a science fiction novel that was made in the 1950s because the guy was afraid of communism and thought it was okay. Like, it was okay that the United States used the bomb on and was like, didn't want people to cry over that. It's just like, you know, a guy who was, you know, went to the military and thought that that was the way to run a society and thought, you know, everything should be like that. I just don't see this is what annoys me sometimes about these science fiction novels like that. It's like, you know, it's the text is, there's not that much subtext, you know, like that's what he was trying to communicate. He was using it as a way to communicate a very simple idea. And Verhoeven was able to be like, well, I disagree and I'm going to make fun of this a little bit. But if you just like, this movie was just adapted, then it's just like, oh, the military. I don't know. It's like, what's the message exactly? What's the message? This doesn't seem interesting. Even if I shared those politics, it doesn't seem that interesting to me, you know? And there are things with dubious politics, but I think that they're ambiguous enough or contain other tensions that hold my interest, but it just wouldn't even hold my interest. Like that conceit doesn't hold my interest. It barely holds my interest in the satire. I mean, now that I thought about it a little bit in respect to the president, I'm a little more into it, but I just don't think it needs a more faithful adaptation.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah. In fact, if you're gonna spend money on adapting, you know, 1950s science fiction, there's much better stuff to go for.
Yeah.
In terms of doing so, but I don't think Heinlein needs a new adaptation. And I would frankly just like question the intent of someone who was aiming to do a new adaptation of Heinlein in this moment.
Yeah.
I think that's good for last thoughts, so we can wrap up. Yeah, let's wrap up.
Okay.
Would you recommend the movie? I would recommend the movie, but I like it. But how about yourself?
No, not really, but not. I'm not strongly against it, but I wouldn't. I don't think I'm gonna watch it ever again. I don't know, unless a girlfriend like forces me to or something like that. I just don't.
Right.
I just don't see a situation in which I would watch this movie again. Unlike many of the things we watch, which I watch over and over. But yeah, not thrilled by it. Not a hater, but not into it.
Yeah. All right, that's our show. Thank you for listening as always. If you go to our Apple Podcast page, I always say iTunes, but iTunes doesn't really exist anymore. Our Apple Podcast page, you can leave a review of the podcast, and we do appreciate that. It helps people find the show. In addition to Apple Podcasts, you can find us pretty much wherever podcasts are found, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you sign up to listen to podcasts, ours is available. You can reach out to us over social media if you'd like to, but the best place to send us feedback is via the feedback email, unclear and present feedback at fastmail.com. For this week in feedback, we have an email we have a couple, and so I'm going to find this one. Here we go. This is a good one. This is an email from Rick titled, "You couldn't make the Lethal Weapon films today." Hi, Jamelle and John. Big fan of the pod. I'm writing because I just rewatched the 4 Lethal Weapon films and was fascinated by how they mapped onto our current politics. I really think you guys should consider doing an episode on Lethal Weapon 4 and maybe a Patreon episode on the other 3, although I know from conspiracy theory how much John hates Mel Gibson. What's most interesting to me are the villains in the 4 films. In the first one, the bad guys are a gang of ex-Special Forces guys who have become heroin smugglers. This very scenario has turned out to be true, as documented by the recent book The Fort Bragg Cartel by Seth Harp. In the second film, the antagonists are a white South African diplomat and his flunkies. This is perhaps the wokest of the films, as it's about a black cop and his white partner fighting the agents of apartheid. Danny Glover's character, Roger Murtaugh, is even established as canonically anti-apartheid in the first film by a shot of the family fridge with a large bumper sticker on it that reads, "End Apartheid, Free South Africa." What's interesting to me about this film is how you could probably not make it today because, as we know, Donald Trump is very much a fan of white South Africans. And the South African trio of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and David Sachs now wield tremendous power in our government. Maybe not Musk so much anymore. The third film, about a corrupt ex-cop who is now an arms dealer, is perhaps less salient to our current moment, though I do think that this kind of person in the current day is Trump's kind of person. The final movie in this series is the most relevant, as it's about the Chinese triad smuggling undocumented immigrants into the country. In the opening scene, after Murtaugh and Riggs have discovered a group of Chinese crammed into the hold of a ship, Murtaugh confronts an INS agent, this is prior to the creation of ICE, who speaks disparagingly of them. He says, "What happened to the sign that says, 'Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free'?" The INS agent replies, "Now it says no vacancies." Murtaugh secretly shelters one of the immigrant families in his house. In addition to the film's pro-immigrant views, the other reason it would be difficult to make today is that the movie studios won't make Chinese nationals the villains in any films because they want to be able to sell their pictures in the PRC. Although I think Lethal Weapon 4 gets around this by having the bad guys be from Hong Kong rather than the mainland. Anyway, I thought it was interesting how in the first three films, the kind of guys who are the antagonist, along with law enforcement officers, are now sort of all in the vanguard of Trumpism, making the politics of these films sort of alien to our present moment. In any case, I highly recommend you give them a viewing, as the first three are all absolute fucking bangers. Lethal Weapon 4 is by far the worst of the bunch, though the most relevant to the theme of your podcast. That's how we like it, the bad ones. Keep up the great work. Yours truly. Thank you, Rick. Great email. I have not watched any Lethal Weapon films in some time. I will rewatch these just to rewatch them, but it might make for an interesting project. The first Lethal Weapon is good.
I don't want to watch all of Lethal Weapon. I mean, it's funny. It's interesting. I like the letter that Lethal Weapon is too woke now for today. That's interesting. But yeah, no, I don't think I've watched any Lethal Weapon movie. I probably should. But the first one's good.
The first one's great. The first one is actually like a genuine classic of the buddy cop genre. I
like Danny Glover a lot.
Yeah, it has Gary Busey as the villain. He's great. If you've never seen a Lethal Weapon movie, you should at least Lethal Weapon. The first Lethal Weapon, legitimately a great film. I like 2 quite a bit, and then it's kind of diminishing returns after that. But it's like Lethal Weapon along with Beverly Hills Cop and 48 Hours. Like, these are kind of the canonical cop films of the 80s, and I do recommend you check it out. And Die Hard is a canonical cop film. So those are your 4.
Right.
All right. Thank you for the feedback, Rick, and for the rest of you. If you want to reach us, unclear and present feedback at fastmail.com. Episodes come out roughly every 2 weeks, and so we'll be back to you in 2 weeks or so from when you hear this episode, when this episode is released, with a new episode on. I got to take a look at our list here. Starship Troopers, with a new episode on The Jackal, directed by Michael Catton Jones, starring another Richard Gere. Christ.
No.
Starring Bruce Willis and Richard Gere and Sidney Poitier.
That's good.
J.K. Simmons is in it as well. A lot of people. How do you stop an assassin who has no identity? Hired by a powerful member of the Russian mafia to avenge an FBI sting that left his brother dead, a psychopathic hitman known only as the Jackal proves an elusive target for the people charged with the task of bringing him down. A deputy FBI director, a Russian MVK major, and a jailed IRA terrorist who can recognize him. This feels like you ChatGPT'd a 90s
the
thriller.
Podcast. Using the podcast as a source material.
Right. You just plugged every episode of the podcast into ChatGPT, like spit out a script.
Yeah.
And this is the movie that it made. So The Jackal it seems perfectly mediocre, and that's going to be your next film. Over on the Patreon, we have an episode on the Bader Meinhof complex, kind of a two-parter with our previous episode on Carlos. And our next set of Patreon episodes, or next Patreon episode, will be on the 3 Mobile Suit Gundam compilation movies, which I've been told are no longer available on Netflix. And so the way to watch them, I'm checking this out right now, the way to watch them without paying any money is going to be, I will continue looking this up. And if they aren't available in any easy form, then we're just going to switch gears for the Patreon episode. We'll decide on something else. But I think you should be able to find them this way. But I'll look into that. But that's the next Patreon episode, Gundam being the Japanese mecha anime, indebted in some ways to Starship Troopers. Heinlein kind of pioneers the idea of a mobile armor. So kind of part of a theme, you might say, and a series that deals with the horrors of war and militarism. So I think on brand, or not on brand, on topic for this, with this the Starship Troopers episode. And yes, the Gundam films are all on archive.org. So I will just provide links to those to you, John. And if you search archive.org, you should be able to find this. I don't know how I can provide links to y'all who are not Patreon members. I'll put them up on the Patreon. So if you are subscribed to the Patreon, you can find them there. All right. That is it for this week's show. For John Gans, I'm Jamelle Bowie, and we'll see you next time.